to I went to, where did I go last week, Chris? We went to Nantucket. I'd never been, and it was so amazing. It's 103 degrees in Texas, and so it was so nice to
The
get
weather was probably amazing.
amazing. Yeah. So
It's good today.
good. Yeah. It's 103 here. And Chris, I'm sure you have like sunny California.
Oh, it's beautiful out here in California. It's probably like 70.
Sorry.
It's like 73 and it's like cool and stuff. Actually, today's live stream is all about the weather across the state. So hopefully, hopefully you can join us.
It's just no matter what we say, everybody's going to be fine with it because I feel like weather people are the only ones that have job security, even if they're wrong.
Yes, you can be wrong all the time. I know you're looking at your screen and wondering, because this is different for us, Liz. I realize we never meet the second Wednesday of the month. This is like a first time ever, because normally John Abramowitz and Kyle King bring you their live stream, where they dissect. It's a research roundtable where they kind of dissect like the latest research and kind of bring it in digestible bites for the general public and for clinicians. So we've never been on a second Wednesday, so this is new territory. So hi. Well, welcome to the live stream. So today you are watching a Lunch and Learn, and a Lunch and Learn is an opportunity for us to take kind of like a hot topic in the community and sort of digest it, talk about it, bring it to you, open it up for comments and sharing. So as always, this live stream may be hosted by us, but it's your live stream. So please, in the comments, say hi to our special guest, Allegra, say hi to Liz and I, say hi to the IOCDF. Also, if you have any comments, questions, who are you here to support? Any thoughts that are on your mind. And then as we start to get in the conversation, please feel free to jump in, support everybody else in the chat, as well as bring us your questions. We'd love to answer those. So a couple quick housekeeping things, and then we'll jump into it. So always remember that this live stream is educational and not intended to replace therapy. So for treatment-related questions, please work with your provider, or you can contact a local clinician. If you don't have one, go to the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find-help and locate a trained clinician near you. The IOCDF is not a crisis hotline, so if you are in a crisis or you are ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Hotline by dialing 988. You can also go to 988lifeline.org. And then finally, we want to create a safe space and be kind and respectful to everyone. So at the end of the day, we're all here to support each other. And note, this is being broadcast on several social media platforms and is being recorded. So thank you so much for coming to the live stream. Once again, jump in the chat, share where you're from, ask your questions and your comments. So today's Lunch and Learn, I'm super excited about. I'm going to let Liz kind of tee us off. But I first want to introduce our special guest. So Alegra Kastens is a licensed therapist in New York and California, because she used to be out here with me, and she said peace. She went across the country. I shouldn't take that personal, that she literally is like on the other side of the hemisphere from me, but she's one of my good friends. Absolutely an OCD specialist and genius, has an amazing platform, helps so many people. So we're really happy to have Allegra here today. And I realize that all three of us on this live have OCD and are licensed to treat it. So we're gonna give you insights from both sides of the couch, I guess. So Allegra, welcome to the show.
You forgot to say I'm your wife, Chris.
And she's my wife.
This is why I moved across the country.
She's like, if we're going to get married, we need to be on the other side. Oh, by the way, Allegra and I want to see Taylor Swift tour live. So if you have any kind of like insights of how to get Taylor Swift tickets without selling a kidney and an arm, we would love to go.
You want to buy us one? Please.
GoFundMe, right?
Here's my GoFundMe link.
Yes. I love y'all. Y'all are so funny.
I'm going to let Allegra kind of talk about the topic, but I actually want Liz to tee it off, because I know Liz was really inspired by it, really wanted Allegra to come on and talk about it. So maybe, Liz, I'll start with you about, what was it about Allegra's post, and what did you felt very inspired. I felt inspired, and then we'll kind of talk to Allegra about what kind of brought her in the mix.
Yeah, and actually, like, maybe before the post, we can just like chat for a second. But I am so excited you're here, Allegra. I don't know if you know, but I've been following you for however long and all the stuff you do, and it's been so amazing. And I think that the thing I love that I just want to touch base on it, Chris kind of did, is that I think all three of us obviously have lived experience with OCD. We also are advocates with OCD, and we're clinicians. And I think that's pretty rare, right? A lot of times we see advocates who might not be clinicians, right? Who might be advocates, but maybe they don't have OCD, whatever. And so I say that just because I think this is going to be such a great webinar, because of course we're going to share clinical insights, which is the point of these Wednesday Lunch and Learns. but we're also going to, I hope, share like the way these clinical insights impacted us personally, or maybe even still do. And I think that's just so awesome for our audience to get to hear. But I also just want to say like, thank you, because it's been watching you over the years and the work that you do. I think I've just always been so beyond impressed by your humility and willingness to just be vulnerable and open, and all of us need that. So just thank you for being you. And if you want to share a little bit about just first like your platform and what you do and why you got into the field. And I mean, I know everyone would love to hear that.
Definitely. Where am I supposed to look in these things? Am I looking like,
I never know.
Okay, I never know either. I'm like, do I look at the comments? I'm going to be like looking at this guy. I'll look at both of you. So I have OCD. I have lived experience. And when I was 19 years old, I had a really rapid onset of POCD. And then it kind of turned into sexual obsessions about literally anyone and anything, like dogs, friends, people, family members. And I was so ashamed. I was so terrified by my own mind. And I mean, I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell a doctor. I couldn't tell anybody about what I was experiencing. And I was even so afraid to Google it, because what was I going to find when I Googled, why am I having scary sexual thoughts about children? But when I finally did Google it about, I think it was like 15 months later, which I know is relatively short for some people, I found Made of Millions or intrusivethoughts.org. I found the OCD Center of Los Angeles, and I just found these resources that were sharing about different obsessional themes. And it really inspired me to be that person for someone else, especially with the more taboo and stigmatized themes that we just don't have enough info about. I love Rose Cartwright. I feel like we all owe so much to her. I was able to see her as like this beautiful young woman struggling with POCD. And I want to be, not that I'm like a beautiful young woman, but I want to be that person.
You are.
Yes, you are. I'm like, what do you mean?
I don't want to be, I'm pretty. No, that's not what I was trying to say. I want to be like just a relatable person that also has POCD. I think we often think if someone has POCD, are they this like old, creepy pedophile? And that's not it whatsoever. It can happen to a 19-year-old like me who has loved kids forever. And that just really inspired the start of this whole platform.
Yeah, I love it. And, you know, I think for a lot of us who've had POCD, myself included, it's not only is it like, it's so important for us to talk about it, but it isn't always great, right? Like, let's be real. Like, so, like, not like I can remember I've told this story about when I was dating someone once, and they were like, so I saw this video you did, and like, I can't believe you'd actually do that to a kid. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And I remember it was kind of like the end of the relationship, because I was just like, you have no understanding of me. And like, this is so far from who we are. But actually, that kind of segues perfectly into like why we're having this conversation, right? Is that I have gotten so upset lately that I feel like, so I think two things have happened. These are my own assumptions, and y'all can tell me I'm wrong, right? But is I feel like there's been this amazing advocacy movement, right? We're seeing so many new advocates, which is so awesome, and so many people speaking out about OCD, and I love that. And I feel like there's been this big push that people have heard this message of like, you can have really bad OCD and you can really be struggling, but still choose to live by your values, which a lot of us resonate with. But I also think part of the problem is that sometimes the way those of us with OCD have heard that is that, oh, we are always going to have to struggle, and we have to accept that like, we're always going to have these thoughts. We're always going to kind of have a second life to OCD, but we can like push through and live by our values, right? Like there's become this message that like ERP means like ERP forever, and that you're never going to have clarity, and that you're never going to have insight or freedom, and that you have to just like function while really struggling. Like, am I on par at all like here?
1,000%. And like, I'll take it a step further. I think the idea of even like accepting uncertainty, I think people often don't know what they mean when clinicians say that or when they're saying that. And it becomes this like, to recover from OCD, you must accept uncertainty. And like
forever. Right. Uncertainty forever, right?
Right. Or even like during treatment, right? Like, I don't think that some people have to, like, I'm going to break it down in a million ways. Number one, accepting uncertainty is not synonymous with response prevention. And I think that's what people mean sometimes is like, stop trying to figure this out right now. That's different than saying, I genuinely don't know who I am, which of course OCD makes us doubt that. Of course we feel uncertain. That's 100%. But saying like, which I often hear, like, you're just never going to get to know the truth about who you are because you have OCD. Is inaccurate. Like OCD is ego dystonic. That literally means opposite to a person's self-concept. When I went into treatment, I knew I wasn't a pedophile. There was not even like, I was terrified because I was having the thoughts and images, but I knew this isn't me. I was never told by my therapist to accept uncertainty. I got an article in my first session that said like POCD versus pedophilia, differential diagnosis. And any kind of like maybe, maybe not was a non-engagement response. It wasn't like actually believe this. And I think that that's what people have trouble with is like, you're telling me that I can't know, but people without OCD know these things. And I feel like people with OCD can know whether or not we're pedophiles. Like I know that I'm not. I asked my friend, I was curious. I went to the beach over the weekend and I said, are you certain that you're not a pedophile? And she said, of course I'm certain that I'm not a pedophile. You know, like she knows that. People with OCD get to know this about ourselves. And I think that treatment should help us get to that place instead of treatment being about you're always going to be uncertain. Just accept that. And that's freedom. Like that to me feels like I would have died if my therapist said that to me. If she said, you have to accept that you could be, I would have croaked right there in her office.
Oh, I like want to heart a million times, right? We can't do that on this dang platform.
I look, I'm always really thankful. My therapist, Karen Pickett, when I worked with her, I know you got to meet her. I love Karen.
Hey, meet her. Karen is my bestie.
Yeah. Well, I meant
I don't know her.
Okay.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Bestie girl.
No, I mean, I think the way that Karen handled it. So I never had POCD, but I had sexual intrusive thoughts around strangers. So mine were less about it. My thoughts about sexual intrusive thoughts were less about like, could I? And for me, it was like these just very violent images. I always would be like at a checkout station because I didn't leave the house. I was housebound for many years. And so I'd be at the grocery store and I'd be waiting in line and the person in front of me would take a while. And my brain would just start to say like, you want to violently grab this woman. You want to attack her. You want to like do sexual things with her. I started having doubts about, do I find my family members attractive? Do I want to have sex with my family members? And I had harm OCD. And it was about harming my grandma, my youngest sister. What if I'm violent, right? And I think what my therapist was able to do with me, which I do with my clients, and I hope that our community could move towards, is she didn't, when I came to her and I said those things, and I said, look, I know I've had all these other subtypes. I don't know what the hell's going on in my brain because all these things are coming up for me. I think if she would have said like, hey, like that first day, right? Like, hey, maybe you are. I think you just have to kind of like live with this. I would have probably, put myself back in a hospital. And the way that she approached me, she said, look, the way that happens is OCD kind of presented this concept, right? You bit because OCD wants you to bite. And every time you try to get clarity, every time you try to figure it out, every time you try to make this decision with OCD in the room, you are less clear. You are going to become more confused. And just like every other subtype you had, the more you give into the OCD, the more you're going to feel like you are really that thing. So let's create a really good strategic plan of how we're going to cut out these compulsions, how we're going to address the thoughts, how you're going to just like change your relationship with this experience you have right now, because I want you to get back to clarity so that you aren't experiencing this. And what happened for me is like, as I did the treatment, I reconnected with who I was. And I was like, okay, I'm not a violent person. I really love my family. That's not who I am. Now, there was definitely times that I felt uncertain and I felt doubtful, etc. But I always recognized it was because I was doing compulsions or I was ruminating or doing mental, compulsions that we see a lot with taboo thoughts. So I think what I want people to learn, especially out there with taboo thoughts, is there's a difference, right? If I have a client who is afraid that she may hit somebody with a car, let's say it's not the traditional hit and run, like I won't know if I hit or not, but just genuinely fearful of hitting someone with a car. I can't sit there as your therapist and say, hey, you're never going to do that, right? I don't think you're going to purposely do it, but you could potentially be looking down or whatever. But when it comes to the taboo stuff where a client has always been a great person, it's totally ego dystonic. My first response to them is not like, well, come to therapy and be confused if you're ever going to be that horrible person. So I think we got to work on that so people don't assume that's what treatment looks like.
So we did this webinar. I can't remember, was it a webinar or I guess it was a talk at a conference a couple of years ago, Chris, with me and Callie and I think Emily. And one of the things we talked about is like, you don't have to accept your worst case fears as truth to get better in treatment, right? Like so many people thought it's like, oh, I have to be okay that I might be a pedophile. It's like, what? Don't sign me up for that shit. Like I'm not interested, right? Like not for me, you know? And so it's interesting, you guys, because I was just reflecting when you were just saying that about uncertainty, Allegra, is that this is probably like a year ago. We always try to do like staff retreats at our clinic here and bring our clinicians to say like, hey, what are some new modalities? And we try to all train each other and think about it. And I remember one of our newer clinicians was like, before the training, I need to talk to you. And I was like, oh, what's going on? And he was like, you know, I don't really know how to tell you this, but I feel like we really shouldn't use the word uncertainty here anymore. And I remember at first I was like, what? Why? And I was like, I don't like, what are you talking about? And it was hard for me, right, to hear that, because for years I had used the word uncertainty, and he when he explained why, I was like, but Brian, like that's exactly what I mean. And he's like, I know that, but patients and other people don't hear that, right? So like, you mean like, oh, let's just learn to live in a probable world like everyone else does, and if you do that, that you'll actually get clarity around your fears. But when they hear the word uncertainty, people in the field are starting to think that means you have to accept you will be uncertain forever. And so it was a huge shift for us. And candidly, at first I was like, I had learned around the word uncertainty, even though it wasn't what I meant, it's how I had been trained. And so I was kind of like, I don't know, you know, but I totally get it now. And we rarely use the word uncertainty. Instead, we talk about like leaning in, and, you know, you talked to Allegra about non-engagement, you know, and so we all a lot of us meant the same thing, but the way the community hears it is very different. And we do have to be really thoughtful of like, what do we mean by that, right? And so I would love for you to talk a little bit before we hop into like more specifics, but you talked about non-engagement. And I think it's just so important for us to kind of talk about what is response prevention versus and non-engagement, and what does that look like when you meet like.
So I'm going to break the whole internet here. I will say in my own personal treatment, the two things that helped me most were cognitive therapy, metacognitive therapy. And I think as much as all of us are behavioral specialists, I'm sure all of us do some kind of cognitive therapy. Like when I went,
that's a problem. Let me just hop in, right? Because that should be part of psychoed too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So when my therapist said to me, it sounds beyond ridiculous, thoughts are not facts and feelings are not facts, my whole mind was blown. And when I learned mindfulness, that was the second thing, an acceptance of the presence, not the content. Because I was more like Chris, where my brain would literally be like image, 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 fuck your dad, fuck this kid, whatever. I don't know if we're allowed to cuss on here, but you got me on the live.
Why not? I'm good with it. Yeah.
And I had to learn how to practice accepting the presence of that, because my brain was very, very, very loud. That helped me the most. And I think what also helped me was like looking at why I'm buying into this idea that like maybe I'm a pedophile. And I think that that's like what treatment can help with. And that doesn't always have to be compulsive, you know, like metacognitive therapy, mindfulness, ICBT, like there are definitely treatments that can help us look at why am I buying into this doubt? And then that can help me go do those values-based things like, you know, change a baby's diaper. I haven't done that because I don't have a child, but bathe my dogs in the shower, which is totally fine for me now. I have to touch their little vagines and buttholes when I'm bathing them. And like, it's totally fine. I had to learn that I wasn't that person before I was able to do those things. And I had to learn how to stop engaging with my thoughts, which is non-engagement. There's that thought. Thanks, brain. Here it is. But it wasn't me saying I could be this and I've got to tolerate that. It's not helpful to engage with OCD. So let's totally drop this right now. And that was also response prevention, which is so different than accept that you could be. It's let's stop engaging with this.
Well, and I also think, you know, one of the things I talk to people about is like the uncertainty model there is leaving it unanswered, right? Like that's what a lot of us mean when we say uncertainty. We don't mean like, yeah, you need to like lean into, oh yeah, I might be a pedophile. Instead, it's about dropping it and leaving it unanswered, right? Which means I'm not going, maybe we don't call it uncertainty, but we just say you don't search for OCD certainty, right? But I give this example a lot because I have lived with pedophilia OCD for my whole life since I can remember. And it definitely has been the most disturbing of my OCD, which it is for a lot of us, right? Because it's just so far against who we are. And there's like zero ability for most of us to tolerate that thought. And so it was just probably about, I have a 1 and a 2-year-old. And so this was probably about, I don't know, 6 months into my daughter being born. And I had a awful, graphic, horrific, right, sexual intrusive thought about her, very graphic. And I had woken up with it. And I remember, right, I was in a totally different place with OCD than I was a long time ago. And for me, the way treatment looked was being able to be like, okay, that's a shitty thought, right? Like, that's awful. I wish I didn't have that, because that's the reality. I'm not going to be like, oh, I love this thought. Thank you. Like, no, I don't want that thought. Like, why would I do that?
Right.
And being able to be like, I'm going to make the choice right now not to figure out what this thought means or do anything about it and move on. I remember I got up, I took a shower. It was a weekend, but I was running group at the clinic. And so I came in, and I remember by the time I was done with group, I forgot I even had that thought, right? That's what ERP treatment, OCD work, whatever you want to, right? That's what it's all about. It's about being able to not engage with your OCD, which my OCD wanted me to know, why'd I have that thought? What does that mean about me? Like, wanting to solve it, wanting to answer it, wanting to get rid of it, wanting to ask reassurance. Like, we can't engage, right? We all can agree with that. Like, the second you engage, you're pulled in, you're trapped. And so it's about being able to treat it as a thought versus treating it as reality, right? And then you move on, and then it lessens the grip and it lessens the hold. And I think that is so much different than me thinking I would have to go all day being like, well, I might be, maybe I'm a pedophile, maybe I'm not. Maybe I wanted that sexual intrusive thought around my kid. Like, maybe like that actually, like, in a sense, that actually would make it worse, right? Because then I'm still engaging with it and giving it more power, even if it feels like it's in an OCD powerful way, right?
Totally. And like, I love what you just described, because it's like, I see OCD for what it is, and I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I'll say that to clients sometimes. Like, when you learn through treatment, like, duh, I see why my brain is doing this. I see what this means. Let's not touch that. But you weren't like, I could be this person. And I feel like that is like what keeps so many people stuck, is like the idea that we must accept that as a reality when that's not the case. And like, I'm sure, like, we can feel uncertain, but I'm also certain that I'm not a pedophile, even when my OCD makes me doubt that. And I know that like terrifies some people, you know, the word certainty, and some people have the philosophy that we never have it about anything. I'm a firm believer that we can know things even when our OCD makes us doubt it. Let's figure out why our OCD is making us doubt it, and let's stop engaging compulsively.
Yeah, Chris and I coined the word clarity. You want to talk about that a little bit, Chris? Of just like, you know, like, you should expect clarity from treatment.
Yeah, one of the things that I want all my clients to expect in you know, in sessions with me, and what I want everybody watching this either live or back to you know, really understand, is the idea of treatment is that we're trying to get you to a point where OCD isn't dominating the discourse. And one of the things that happened in my own care, and what I see happen in other people's care, is they start to get clarity. So an example would be, you know, if somebody really comes in, I think sexual orientation, OCD, I work with a lot of individuals with that. And if a heterosexual male comes in and says, look, I can't go to the gym anymore, I'm constantly being triggered, I'm questioning my sexual orientation, etc. What I tell them is, I don't know you. I just met you. This is our first session. I can't promise you you're straight. I can't promise you you're gay, bisexual. That's not our role in therapy. Our role in therapy is to get OCD the heck out of the situation. And then once the OCD is gone, you'll have your clarity. You're not going to be in this state of doubt and this state of confusion for the rest of your life. Or else, why would you come to therapy? Why would you pay someone weekly to never, ever get clarity? You could already do that with OCD at home. And so I'm thinking of a recent client. So we worked together. The gym was a big trigger. They went to the gym. They changed kind of the whole, like, you know, mental philosophy, the way that they addressed their thoughts, the way that they did their behaviors. And at the end of the treatment, we concluded about a month ago, he had clarity. He's like, I really, really know that I love my wife. I'm excited for our first child. And I recognize now that all of that doubt stuff that I was living in was the OCD. I'm very clear. And what I told him is like, look, you got your own clarity. You did the work, you got the clarity, and now you really know who you are. And that's awesome. You could move forward with your life as you wanted, etc. If instead the idea was that he was just never going to know forever, he was going to be 87 still doing that, then that person is actually probably going to more engage with OCD, because it's going to be tempting to do compulsions in low moments because he wants that clarity. He got that clarity from not doing the OCD treatment. Now, I will say some things I'm not certain on. I'm about to go to Italy in October, and I have never flown overseas. I have no clue what it's like to travel out of the country. I've never been on a plane for 14 hours, and I have no clue if my my luggage is going to get there. So that's why I tell clients, like, some of these subtypes you're going to have to address differently. So if I was struggling really bad with OCD around it, my therapist couldn't promise me that I'd have certainty that my luggage is going to make it, or I'm not going to have a horrible time on a 14-hour flight. But what the treatment should be doing is that I trust myself that I'll be able to handle any of those challenges. So just like somebody else who travels, if I get to Italy and my luggage is lost, I'm going to have to go to the store and buy clothes. It's probably going to be nicer clothes than I own, because I'm sure it's
darn, sounds so bad.
In Italy, right? Oh, darn, right? If I'm on the flight and the 14 hours is a really, really difficult flight for me, I can upgrade on the way back to get more leg room. Like if I'm, getting stuck at the airport and don't know how to go through customs and all that stuff, there'll be people to ask. So if I can't have 100% certainty that my luggage will get there because I don't have control over it, I can at least be certain that I'll be able to handle that situation. I trust that I'm a big boy and we'll figure it out.
I love that. Yeah. And I would agree when you said like specific themes, like relationship OCD, when clients say like, I really need to know that this is the one for me for the rest of my life. Like, I don't have that answer to that question, like I genuinely don't. I don't think.
Or scrupulosity, right? Like none of the three of us can promise our clients are going to go to heaven.
I mean, I'm going to go to,
I am.
My ass is rotten in hell. So I just tell people I'm kidding. But like, there are certain things that, right, like I can't give a definitive answer, or existential obsessions, right? And someone said something, I forget who it was, but someone said no answer is also an answer. And that kind of blew my mind as well, accepting that like, there's not an answer to this. I've got to stop figuring it out. But when it comes to things we can know, like if we're a pedophile or not, I believe we can know those things. Let's help clients know those things.
Yeah, I think it's just so important for us to understand that the goal of treatment is that you have clarity, right? So from a diagnostic perspective, as clinicians, we talk about how patients, when they first come to us, they have low insight, right? Typically, they're very enmeshed with their OCD. They're really struggling with like, I don't even know what to do. I don't know what's true. Like, I don't need, right? And at the end of treatment, you should be able to know. Like people ask me all the time, Liz, how do I know if it's an OCD thought or not? And I'm like, if this is an OCD thought. And they're like, okay, fair. I probably do. Right. But you should have clarity to know that like, that's my OCD. That's not right. I can tell you with certainty, I'm not going to harm someone I love intentionally. I am not a pedophile. Like I can tell you that. I have zero qualms about it. Even though we got this question, so we'll get to it in a second, I might still sometimes have random thoughts that are contrary to that. Right. So it doesn't mean that we're going to know that and never have a thought. But the thing I always talk about is that our goal is that your thoughts stay thoughts and they don't become triggers. Mm-hmm. And if you've done the work effectively for you, you should be able to talk about things freely. You're right. You and I, Allegra, and others know that with pedophilia OCD, when we were in the throes, we couldn't have even talked about it in a calm manner.
Oh my God.
Right. Like, no way. Right. It's like you couldn't. And you couldn't read an article and you avoid the news, right? Everything was a trigger where, yes, you should absolutely get to a place in your life where the topic can get brought up. You can think about it, you can talk about it, and it's not hard for you. But it doesn't mean that you're never going to have a thought, but it also doesn't mean that you have to never know the truth about who you are as a person.
I want to do like the clapping emoji. I wish there was like the claps, and there's not.
Based on what you just said, Liz, Brennan, if we could put Amy's comment from 12:27 your time up. I love Amy. She has such good insight. And one of the things that she said is being in recovery has given me clarity about my values versus OCD thoughts and rules. I trust myself to live according to my values, and OCD can't take that away. And I think what Amy is saying is the goal of treatment is to get to a point where you really, really understand yourself and you know who you are. I think the most insidious thing about OCD is it takes away your identity. And that's why it's so easy for OCD to con us into these things. I was talking about this topic to my group last night. And we were talking, I was like, how did OCD get you to stop trusting yourself? And when people were talking about it, they were really just saying like, OCD has beat me down for the last 15 years to the point that I don't even know who I am anymore. My identity has circled around the OCD. And because I feel so disconnected with who I am, OCD can pretty much accuse me of anything and I'm falling for it. So I think that's the other thing what Amy just said is the treatment should get you to a point where you really start to understand who you are and you're really connected with yourself. And then it is a hell of a lot harder for OCD to say that you're a pedophile or that you're going to harm someone in your life because you're connected with who you are. I also, if you could throw up Fred's
also
comment.
can I add in there, Chris, like what Kim's work, right? Kim Quinlan has done such great work on self-compassion. OCD also allows you to love who you are, right? Not just know who you are, but like love yourself and love the person you are and not be in this constant debate with it, which is, I think, such also a critical piece that's often missed in OCD treatment. A lot of us like run from self-compassion, or we like forget the importance of that in our work.
I just want to put up real quick Fred's comment, Brennan, at 1226 about losing luggage in Italy is a real probability and obsession is not. I like that, because I think what we have to recognize the difference is like, I'm on top of my OCD, so I'm not letting myself really get into those obsessional doubts, right, about my luggage being lost. I know it's a possibility. I don't know how likely it is. I'm not going to look up the statistics. What I recognize is sitting here, my trip is in October. If I spend all of August, all of September, and the beginning of October just sitting there in that kind of like compulsive rumination, mental compulsions, obsessing and thinking about it, my luggage is not 1% safer of getting to Italy.
Right.
I've completely wasted my time. And in fact, the more time I've spent in my head doubting myself and kind of being uncertain if it's going to make it there or not, I'm going to be less prepared to handle it if it happens, because I'm going to be so distraught. So what I'm really good at doing because of my recovery is saying, look, when that incident occurs, I will respond, and I trust myself to respond, but I'm not going to respond to something that hasn't occurred yet. So that's how, like for me, and what I tell my clients, I have a client going under surgery, and there is a probability that it might not go well. I think it's like 25-75. And so what I said is like, we can't do anything today. You've done all the pre-surgery stuff. Let's just trust yourself and trust your family, your support system, that you'll be able to get through the difficult times if it goes that direction.
And that
probability.
And that reminds me of like, even like the ways that like when I was really bad in my OCD, like I had this fear that I was going to get my wisdom teeth taken out. And then while I was under anesthesia, anesthesia. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. That I was like say my intrusive thoughts out loud. And I just had to be like, you know what? If that happens, I will cope with it then. Right. So like there are things that we have to like, if that were to happen, I would deal with it then. But when it comes to like my identity, absolutely not. Like there is so much nuance.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I think that again, this is where there's that OCD trap, right? Is like, oh, well, you say I can have certainty, then I need to have it all the time about every single thing. It's like, well, you like, I always use this example that I run group here at the clinic on Monday morning at 9 a.m. And for all intents and purposes, I have no reason to believe I won't be here at 9 a.m. on Monday mornings. But can I guarantee that I will always be here every Monday at 9 a.m.? Like, no, I have 2 kids. My nanny could get sick. Like all sorts of things can happen, right? That could cause me to be late. But I know that if that happens, I'll figure it out when I need to, right? Like I will do what I need. And so I also want us to think about like, this isn't black and white, right? It's not about the fact that like, you're going to have every answer all the time, always, but that you're going to trust yourself to that. Like, we're going to do the best we can. We know who we are. And if things happen, if stuff comes up, like we'll deal with it when we need to, and we'll have the skills to do that. And in fact, most of us know ourselves, our clients, or you guys watching have even said stuff like, you know, the fear of it happening is worse than if some of these things actually happened, right? So like the fear of ordering the wrong thing off a menu in spending an hour to figure out what you're going to order is worse than if you could just order and enjoy the time with your guests, and maybe you get a meal that you didn't love, right? Like you'd handle it anyways, because even if you spend that hour, you don't know if it's going to be a meal you enjoy anyway, right? And so it's how can we start to live in the flexible zone? Like that's the thing I always say is the goal of treatment isn't really uncertainty, it's flexibility. It's can you learn to be flexible in life and to like not be rigid, to not know all these answers, to not, right? But to be willing to like figure things out as you need to. I know we have a couple questions, so I want to hop to the next one. So we're going to throw it to you, Allegra. It's, I believe, from Brooke, and it says, "You all are fabulous. I know that you all have personally struggled with OCD, and you share your recovery stories. Do you still struggle with OCD or other mental health disorders occasionally?"
Well, I'm not holier than thou, so I will say yes. I get like 2 spikes a year. I always talk about this. And Kim Quinlan's like, I'm putting it in my calendar because it's like always the same month. Chris got the burden of it a few weeks ago. He got like 80 voice notes. No, I will have like 2 weeks or so every 6 months where I have a flare up. But I would say other than that, I would call myself at like 95% recovery with OCD, meaning I know who I am. Not that I don't get unwanted thoughts. My brain is past the point of that. Like I just get more sexual thoughts and images than other people do. But yeah, I mean, therapists are human beings. Of course, we struggle with other things like depression, body image, being single. Like, don't look at therapists like we have it all together, because we absolutely don't. And I don't want anyone to think that like there's this perfect state of recovery where you never have a trigger again for the rest of your life, because I could honestly say that's not the three of us. Unless that is one of you, then God bless.
No, no.
I
I thought that we had Shannon Shy on once, and I thought he said something that really resonated with me. Is he said, Liz, people can call it cured, they can call it management. I don't care what you call it. He said, but I'm at the point in my life that I'm not afraid of anything OCD throws at me. And to me, that is the definition of recovery. Like, that doesn't mean sometimes it might not stick or throw us off, or we need to recalibrate, or we have a couple hard weeks, right? Like, that can happen. But if we're at a place where we're kind of have this like bring it on attitude of like, whatever, you might get me a little bit, but like, I know I'm the winner here. Like, I know I have the strength and power to address you. Like, to me, that's what recovery is. And I will say, I think I've talked a little bit about this, not a lot, but like, postpartum for me and having two kids, I've seen my anxiety increase, general anxiety increase, and be something I actually struggled more with for the first time on a different level than OCD. Like, OCD is still here and there, but I know how to deal with that. And I feel like from a postpartum stance, I like had my team, and I was like so ready for my OCD to be really bad that then when anxiety and depression creeped in, it was like, wait a second, I wasn't ready for this. And so like, that was something new, right? And so like, it's also not, mental health is not like one and done for all of us, right? It's a journey, it's a process, and it ebbs and flows. But the great news is that a lot of the tools we've learned through cognitive behavioral and cognitive interventions across the board are applicable to so many things, that I think that's one of the biggest beauties.
Yeah, I would say for me is the nice thing is like the things that were just never kind of connected with Chris, those have gone for me. So I spent actually Sunday with my family, Sunday evening, and a lot of the family members I was with was a lot of what my intrusive thoughts around like, being sexually attracted to family members were. Zero thoughts, love being around them, had a great time, had good food, all that good stuff. For me, I love the work that Rich Gallagher, or Rich Gallagher, it's not his name. Oh my God, why is my mind blanking?
No, it is, I think.
Oh, Rich. Okay, yeah. When I say it out loud, it sounds like he's like a person who like travels the world and discovers things. Like Rich Gallagher just discovered a new nation. I don't know why the name saying it out. That's what his name sounds like.
What are you talking about, Chris?
I don't know why. I don't know why.
love you.
Like saying his name out loud for some reason, I was like, wait, did I just butcher it? No, the OCD that kind of stuck for me at the end was disgust-based. Like I would get so maddening with it because there was no like obsession, there was no fear around it. It was like an example for me is like if I eat pizza or I eat potato chips, or if I like smell really strong scents like coffee or perfume, or certain things people do, like it just is like this like feeling that goes through my body and it disgusts the heck out of me. It is so maddening. An example is if I'm in a Uber and they have like one of those oil air fresheners, it feels like my life. I just can't think, I can't focus. And so I would do ERP with these things. I was constantly like touching like things and spreading it. I was putting these scents around me and I found that I was not getting better. And I was so frustrated because I was like, oh my God, why is this not working? And then I came across an article that Rich had written like not a long time ago. I think it was like about a year ago or something. And he had put some stuff out. And I found it and I read it and I just so resonated with that. And I've been honored to kind of like be able to tell him how much his work has changed, but his work really helped me with disgust. And now I can eat pizza. That's actually what we had on Sunday. I can be around those things. And what he basically focuses on is like, you have to become a master of the thing you're doing and stop trying to get used to or okay with the thing that causes disgust, because then your focus is on the thing that you disgust. So the mistake I was making is I was so focused on the smells, I was focused on the feelings, and that's all I would think about. And that's why I wasn't getting better. So when I started focusing on the activity and becoming a master at going to a Starbucks, now I get green tea all the time. So thank you so much, Rich. But I also have BDD. And I think as you get older and certain things change, like my brain wants to attack it. Like, oh my God, you're aging, this isn't looking great. So I think it's one of those things that has helped me is what everybody's talking about on this panel. It's like the things that I know are just not me. Those things have moved on because I've learned to trust myself and I'm clear who I am. And then the things that still pop up here and there, my definition of recovery is I never let the OCD dictate a decision I make. And that's like a rule I have for myself. And I will never let OCD influence my daily life and daily decisions.
I love that.
I love that. We have so many comments, so I want to throw the next question if it's okay at you too, Allegra. But I just want to say thank y'all. Y'all are so sweet. The comments are so awesome and kind. They're so amazing. Make us.
I really want to add to Chris's thing is like sensory motor obsessions. Also, I feel like sometimes people are like, well, there's not necessarily a doubt to resolve. It's more like annoying. And I totally get that with my brain too, of like replaying that it will replay the same phrase 80,000 times a day. And it's like just fucking annoying. And I have to get used to it. So I want to validate those people too.
Yeah, right. And we could even talk a little bit about like habituation and how it does still play a role in treatment, right? I think, and that's kind of like, I think been one of my frustrations is that I feel like sometimes when treatment shifts for the better, like we learn about inhibitory learning and what it means, and it like makes so much sense. We think that means that like habituation doesn't exist and we have to be okay with distress forever. That, you guys, is something that's driving me crazy. I actually did a group on Monday at the clinic in the afternoon, and I was like, I asked all of our patients here, I said, guys, like, what do you think the goal of treatment was? And so many people were like, oh, it's to be able to tolerate distress. It's to not care if you feel distressed forever. It's to, and I was like, I'm blowing all this up. And they're like, what are you talking about, Liz? And I was like, guys, like the goal of treatment is that you do get clarity and that you don't keep feeling like shit. Like all three of us, you guys, are people with lived experience who are in this field. How crappy of a job we would have if the best we were trying to do is get you to just feel like crap forever and be okay with that. Like, yeah, we would be frauds sitting up here pretending like we have a good job, right? Like, or that we enjoy what we do. Like, it's the goal is that not only do you get clarity around your fears, you also get rid of or decrease the distress. That doesn't mean you'll never have distress again, just like it doesn't mean you'll never have a thought again. But the distress should also go away when there's no longer fear attached to your thoughts, right? When thoughts are thoughts and not triggers, they shouldn't be distressing. And so I always want to like lay that out there too, because I do think another misconception has been that like when people talk about living by your like you can live by your values while feeling uncomfortable, I feel like sometimes the message that's been interpreted is that you need to accept that you might feel uncomfortable forever and that that's okay. And I'm like, oh, that sounds awful. Like I don't want anyone to think that's the goal of treatment.
Yeah. And like, I know, you know, there's some comments like that's what some advocates in the field advocate for. And like, yes, some of them do, but you also have us three who are having this wonderful conversation and dedicating our time. And you have so many other people who are learning more and rethinking OCD treatment. So I think, yeah, I just want to thank you both for being here and for doing this.
Can I say really quick? Yes. Thank you so much to Brennan. So in the chat, if you have disgust-based OCD and you had the same problem as me, it just wasn't getting better. We put Rich Gallagher. I am so mad at myself that I second guessed his name because he's such an idol to me because his work has changed my life. And I'm like, mad, I almost messed up.
You gave in to your doubt, Chris.
I know. I'm mad at myself. Rich. I love you. But he wrote a great blog for the IOCDF, so it's in the chat. The other thing I want to say is I think the other thing that I really want us to all think about in this field as clinicians and as researchers and stuff is we're asking our clients to become flexible. I always tell my clients, like the biggest kind of superpower we have is flexibility. So, totally. You know, you can go live in Antarctica, you can live in the Sahara Desert and you'll figure it out, right? You'll be flexible. Thank you. And I think like
I'm like, yeah, speak for honey.
I'm not saying I'm going to live there. I'm saying y'all can. But I think
you're worried about losing your bag on the way to Italy and you want to live in Antarctica.
No, it's not happening. Please. I can't even live in in Seattle.
I can't even camp. Okay.
But what I want to say is like, I do also want us to kind of recognize that for some other people, there's certain things that do work, right? There's certain things that we're talking about that we're saying like did not work for us and isn't clear for us. And the other thing I want to validate is there's some advocates that are spreading their message that works for them. And I think what we all have to kind of recognize is like there's a lot of people out there trying to help individuals with OCD and related disorders. And sometimes it's going to look slightly different, but as long as we are following the research, as long as we are following success, we're listening to our clients, et cetera, that's what's going to be great. I do hope though, the overall message of living kind of just never knowing never being certain. I hope that does fade, because I was really thinking about it as you two were talking. I was asking myself, like, why? I mean, why don't I still have these thoughts about harming people in the store, harming my family? I was with my grandma and my sister 2 weeks ago, and my family, and they don't come up. And I really do think it was because the treatment for me, and that's why I resonated with your post, Allegra, is the treatment really for me was a journey to get clarity. It was a journey to set aside this version of Chris that only OCD can make up, because I was never that. I didn't have a history of harming people. There was no reason for me to believe that except OCD. And by the time I got out of treatment, those things were extremely clear for me. The things that kind of stick around is like, I'm a perfectionist. I want things to go great. I'm going to probably work really hard. But I also now, once again, going back to I never let OCD dictate behavior, if I'm starting to recognize that I'm in that zone and I'm going for perfection, I'm able to dial it back. So the cool thing about treatment is some things are going to vanish forever. And some things, if they are something that comes up, you will have the ability to address it instantly and prevent it from being an all day, all week, all month, all year event.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. And yeah, I love it all. I think that you guys, like, I mean, so I first got good treatment in an inpatient setting in Topeka, Kansas 20 years ago. It's been a long time. I would never, as a clinician now, like, I would never do treatment for someone else the same way treatment was done for me. Like, it has evolved and it has shifted. And I also want to be clear, like, it also worked for me back then, right? Like, it could have worked better. And like, I had to learn on my own journey. Like, I was still holding on a lot, and it took me a long time to really lean in and to not hold on. But things for me clicked later. But I just want us to be clear that, like, even what we might say we think works well or we think makes sense doesn't mean it's the only way. Right? For every single person, treatment should be your treatment. I got a question on a post I made the other day, and I private messaged the individual, because the thing I always want people to think about is, are you with the right provider? Are you in the right level of care? Do you have any comorbid conditions, right? Like, there's so many things that should change treatment and our treatment approach. And if you're a good clinician, if treatment isn't working with your patient, you shouldn't continue to try the same treatment and hope for a different result, right? Like, that's the definition of insanity. It should be our job to be saying, hey, like, this isn't working. Let's try something else. Or let's think about what other options exist, or can I give you this referral? Like, that is our job, because I always tell people the worst thing I could do is keep you in treatment with me when you're not ready or there's something else going on, and then make you think that you're not going to be able to get better. Like, that I'm not okay with. I'd rather all day long refer you out, because I think that makes more sense first than for you to have an unsuccessful treatment stay and to think, oh, I can't get better, I'm hopeless, right? Like, that is not the message any of us are comfortable sending.
Yeah, and I think that
oh,
sorry, go.
Go ahead.
I was just
I'm gonna ask this question that's been there after.
Yeah, go.
Okay, people with OCD. They said, my question is, I hear a lot that people with OCD know deep down their obsessions are not true. My problem is I've compulsed so much the past few weeks that I feel like I'm pretty much convinced that it is true. Is this poor insight or just more common in severe OCD cases?
So the Gen Z term apparently these days is delulu for delusional. So I'm like, when my clients come in, I'm like, delulu, okay. I think
learn something new.
Yes, I don't think we talk about enough the fact that OCD can get to a point where it is like the person has such low insight that there is delusion in that sense. It's not psychosis, but the insight is so low that absolutely happens. And the way that you can think about it is like, you might be doubting what you know, or you might be doubting what you knew previously, and you've compulsed so much. Like, I've totally been there. Okay. Like 6 weeks ago when I was voice noting Chris, like, I was caught in that. And I was like, wait, I kind of feel like I don't have insight right now, which is wild because I normally do. So yes, if you are doubting, if you feel uncertain, if you are performing compulsions, of course that leads you to feel more uncertain. Of course that like pushes you away from having insight. That doesn't mean that it's not OCD. And there are so many people who don't have great insight, and it's not a simple like 2-session treatment. Like, we might need to do a lot of work to help you get that insight back. And there's nothing wrong with having, delusional OCD or feeling delusional. I want to say that too.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I mean, when I was at my worst, it was delusional. I remember I was driving home and there was a advertisement, like a billboard for, I think it was like Coors Light or something. And my fear was getting any kind of alcohol in my system. And then I would do something that I wouldn't remember, like harming somebody and end up in jail. And I remember I was driving home and I saw that billboard, and just seeing that billboard, I was like, I'm drunk. I have alcohol in me. And I had to pull into like a parking lot. And I literally was like, okay, I was like researching on my phone, like, how long does it take for you to have alcohol out of your system? And I remember seeing something that said 10 hours. So here I am, like sitting in my car, sleeping in the day for 10 hours because I was convinced. Like, it wasn't, and I'm telling you, when you talk about that, Allegra, I can promise everybody, and I know the people that have been there will relate, there wasn't this like, I'm not sure, so I'm going to do it to be safe. It was legitimately like, if I turn my car back on, I'm going to drive drunk, I'm going to do something I don't want to. And I remember sleeping that 10 hours and probably knowing my OCD, I was like, let me do an extra hour to be safe. There was other things, right? Like, I remember if I walked down an aisle and I walked back past like a bug, spray or something like that, it got into my food. And when I would chew my food, I even almost felt like I tasted it. And I would immediately like sit there and wash out and drink gallons of water to wash it out. So when we're at our worst, to answer that question, if we are literally spending every day, every hour, 16 hours a day, like I was, giving into our compulsions year after year, you are going to get a point where you completely lose insight. And I stopped really understanding what was up and what was down. And I think that's why I've always been an advocate that we can't jump into exposures day one, is because when I met with my therapist, she told me, she's like, you are not at a point with insight yet. I got to get you some insight to be able to even like address this as OCD. And that was the beginning of our treatment, is helping me to get back some insight, because I had lost it for years of giving into the disorder.
Yeah, and I think that I love this next comment that kind of adds into this. Is they said, I've used the phrase choosing to know before with my clients, which acknowledges that the presence of doubt doesn't mean we have to change what we believe. Because I think that's where we get caught, is we feel like, if I'm doubting it, there must be truth to it. And the second we start feeding that, we get further bought into it, and our insight just crashes. I mean, I remember when I had my bloodborne illness fears, I would be like, Mom, you just stepped on that Band-Aid. And she'd be like, Liz, I was nowhere near the Band-Aid. And I'm like, I know I saw it. I can't believe you're lying to me. Like, now you're just trying. And she'd be like, I literally was not near the Band-Aid. And now, as like, when we can talk in a calm manner, she's like, literally, like, you would see things that weren't true, right? But your insight becomes so low that if there was any probability, it was like, oh, that for sure happened, versus being able to see the 75% chance that like that didn't happen,
Yeah, and I want to add, like, it's different than, like, obviously OCD is different than like schizophrenia, but when your intrusive images are so vivid, like, I at one point was like, am I seeing things that aren't here? And I never was. It was all internal. But I want to say that too, like, when it's so loud like that, like, it really can lead you to feel like, what is going on in my brain? Like, I'm literally seeing this in my mind so vividly, I feel like I'm hallucinating, even though you're not.
Amen. I mean, that's what I when preach. No, because I think that's the most difficult thing for loved ones and supporters of somebody with OCD to really understand. Why can't my son just stop? Why can't my, and it's like, I wish it was that easy. It's not just a thought that pops up. What I've started saying to families and loved ones, it's an experience. It's not a thought. It's an experience. Like, when I would sit there and I would be, when I'd be in my living room and it was just my little sister and I would hold on to the couch, because I was like, if I let go, I'm going to harm her. It wasn't just a thought. It was like a feeling. It was a sensation. There was emotions. There was so much going on, full body experience. And I think that's the most difficult part of having OCD, is like, I really believe in mindfulness, Allegra. I was heavily trained in it in my grad program, and I'll have a client in my office just freaking out. And I'm like, okay, let's take a step back. What you're talking to me about right now, let's look around the room. Is it happening? No, you're in an air conditioned, office. There's a couch, etc. But what OCD is able to do is it's able to almost have you time travel into the future or the past, experience a possibility that may occur, and then have you live in that moment. And so you're in that fight or flight to handle handle a moment that may never occur. And that's why it's such an impactful experience. And so I always feel like, how can we get that to the public? Because I think when you talk about finding that article about POCD and how it changed your life and let you get treatment, if we can get out there what OCD is really, really like, we're going to start getting grants, we're going to get research, we're going to get funds, we're going to get better people trained. So that's what I love about all the advocacy that everybody is doing for sure.
Yeah. And there's,
no,
go ahead.
Go.
No, I was just going to say, and I think that like we need exposure with clinicians getting exposed to what treatment really looks like, right? Because we think so many times like a 1 hour, a 2 day, a 3 day training, that's just not enough. You know, those of us that have done this work, I've been in this field for a long time and I learn every single day, right? I learn new things. I shift my perspective. We get better about language we use. And I think that's the big piece is how can we all come to the table and say like, none of us have every answer, but like, we're going to do everything we can to get you the help you need and to be flexible. Like, it's funny. I was telling someone once, I was like, you know, if we stuck in the rigid ways that I did treatment a long time ago, we'd only help a small amount of people. And if I could easily be like, well, it helped me, so it should work for everyone. And it's like, well, that'd be a bad way. But Chris, you talked about like our goal for our patients is flexibility. So doesn't that mean as clinicians, we should be practicing that? Like we should be practicing flexibility around what our patients need, what treatment looks like for them, right? Because that's what we're teaching you at the end of the day. So I think that this is just such a good conversation that cannot stop, that has to continue about how do we rebrand OCD treatment, OCD language, and also what outcomes you should expect from treatment, right? I talk a lot about the goal is freedom from OCD, not learning to function with OCD. And I spent 15 years of my life at minimum, right, thinking that if I was just functioning, like if I could make it through college, if I could get a job, even if I struggled, that was like the best I was going to get, right? I really did think that because that was my life, right? I was like in and out of treatment, kind of doing it. Every week was a different crisis, a different trigger. Like I was never really addressing OCD at the core and at the root. And I kept getting stuck in the cycle. And when you're able to experience freedom, oh my gosh, you guys, like that is why we do this work.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll never forget the first time. It's not a very fun place, but my little sister and I used to love going to Soup Plantation, which RIP, it's no longer around because of the pandemic.
RIP,
RIP Soup Plantation. But I'll never forget, like after treatment, taking my little sister, just she and I, because I would never be alone with her or my grandma. And I remember taking her to Soup Plantation, we're eating. And I had to like go in, this is going to sound cheesy, I had to go in the bathroom and cry because I was just so excited to like sit there with her and just have that experience. Because, you know, I don't know if it's the Greek in me, the older brother, but I'm so protective of people in my family. And no wonder OCD attacked that, right? It knew that I would go and I would fight and do compulsions until 4 a.m. to prevent myself from harming them because I was so protective. But I remember going in the bathroom and crying. And it wasn't because of the gas I was having from Soup Plantation, because that food was nasty, if we're being honest. But it was really just crying because it was this full circle moment. And that's what I want people to get from treatment, and why I do what I do, and why I do these live streams, and why I do all this stuff and stay up hours answering emails, is because that moment of being able to eat with her after years, I'm talking about years of just ignoring her, not talking to her. And that broke my heart. She would ask my dad, like, why doesn't Chris want to play with me? Why doesn't he want to hang out with me? And we had that moment, and that was one of many moments we had. And now we're close. I just saw her a couple weeks ago. And that's what I want everybody for treatment. Your recovery journey should start to get you back to the things that you value. If you were to identify the things most important to you in that life, the treatment should get you there. And if it's not, that isn't the right treatment for you, or talk to your provider, or, you know, something. But that's the way that the direction treatment's supposed to go.
Amen.
Thank you for being so vulnerable, Chris. My gosh.
You know what, if you could say something, Allegra, like, because I know we're coming up in the end, is like, to summarize those that didn't see your, you know, because this whole stream was brought on by your post, and I think it really impacted Liz and I as people and as clinicians. Like, if you could kind of summarize it to those that haven't seen it, like, what do you hope people take from your post and from this live, and what do you hope our organization and our community kind of take from it?
Yeah, I think just the idea that like just because we have OCD doesn't mean that we don't get to know something, right? Like, I think continuing to reinforce that can almost feel like gaslighting for people. Yes, I have OCD, but before I had OCD, I knew exactly who I was, and treatment should help us get to that place of trust. So I think that ultimately would be my main takeaway from this is you can know who you are, and treatment should help you do that. Even when, of course, OCD comes in and takes you out and you're a little delulu or whatever happens, to get back to that place of trust, not
I love it.
certainty.
That's right. Yeah, I love it so much. And I think the thing I always talk about is compulsions make you more confused. Trying to solve gets you more stuck. And what I want us to see is that when we remove those, it doesn't mean you stay stuck in uncertainty forever. That would be awful. It means you get clarity. You get to know who you are, and you get to love who you are. And you know that actually for sure. For certain, even, right? I'm not afraid to say that. And so it has been so clear that we need 1 million live streams with you, Allegra.
I know.
So we are going to be.
I want to come back. I could talk for hours.
Yay! We want you back, and I want Kim on. And how fun would it be over the 4 of us to all be on?
Let's do the 4 of us. That would be amazing.
Yes.
I would also say next
yes.
time we will all match. There is a little bit of a conflict, or not
Chris's
a conflict.
fault.
It was my fault. I sent a text to the wrong thing, but 2 of us have pink.
Chris's fault.
We'll figure it out
It's
for
fine.
sure.
I have pink in my office, my pink chairs.
You're matching.
Oh, there we go.
We all wear a Taylor Swift era, and Chris was like, no.
No. I just didn't have time to get the outfit ready. I was like, no. We need like weeks to plan that. So
I'm in Texas, so I could have worn my sparkly cowboy hat. We would have been good to go quickly. You know me. So. Thank you, Allegra, times 1 million for all that you do, for your voice in the field, and for the impact that you have on all of us with OCD.
And I want to thank you too, as well, for having this conversation, for everything you do for this community. It does not go unnoticed. The flexibility, all of it. I'm just so grateful. There's not people who give their time away like the 2 of you do. So thank you so much.
I want to say a big shout out, obviously, to Liz. I always learn from her, and I love hosting with her. And a big shout out to you, Allegra. I mean, you're somebody that in my personal life and obviously in our community does so much. And so I'm really appreciating this conversation, and I want us to continue to evolve. I was thinking about it too while we're talking, is like when I look at my treatment journey, I look at my clients, there's so many different tools from so many different places that work.
Yes.
And I think that's what we want to keep advocating for. I do want to say I love what Patrick said. OCD does not have your best interests at heart. That's really what I want people to understand, is that OCD is never, ever going to have your best interests at heart. It's not trying to help you. It just takes. Remember that. But we definitely need like a part 2. We need to have you back. We'll throw on Kim. We'll wear pink, Taylor Swift. We'll figure out. We should ask the audience how we should dress, and we'll dress like that. So
gosh.
in some normal levels, though. I don't want people to be like,
I am at my office, so we need, like, I have to see patients before and after. But yeah, if y'all tell us, I guess we'll do it.
And if you did not see Allegra's original post that actually inspired us to have this live stream, please head over to Instagram, go to Alegra Kastens. It was her post about trust. It was really impactful. It was multiple posts on one post, carousel. So please read it all.
Yeah, and that goes for any modality is the last thing I'll say, whether it's ERP, mindfulness, ACT, ICBT, all of this applies.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. It's great to see the 3 of you, or the 2 of you, but I love being on the stage together. But more importantly, thank you for everyone in this community. We know showing up for many of you is so difficult, but the fact that you're here and spending your time with us means the world to us. And we're hopeful that some good insight was provided today.
Thank you. We love all you that joined. We really appreciate it. Take care and kick OCD's butt, as always. And Allegra's dog is cute. I was going to ask you to show it, but...
Oh, no. She's here now.
I know. I heard her. She's so cute.
Hello, darling.
I want you to know, Allegra, remind me, you have 2 dogs.